Got out here early because it's supposed to be hot today. Well, it was nice until the sun came out, and then I started sweating. I just had a drop of sweat drip down my face right as I breathed in, and I just snorted my own sweat. It's gonna be a hot one. Okay, so I've done a few things this morning. I've ground on some more rust because I intend to hopefully finish the POR job this afternoon maybe. But I've also tried to work on cleaning out the inside of the frame. If you own a Jeep or any kind of truck or anything with a closed boxed frame, just because the frame is boxed does not mean that it won't pick up mud. Actually, these frames pick up mud like crazy. And that's actually what causes them to rust out quite a bit on Jeeps. That and a few low spots that weren't really the best design, I would say. But highly recommended anytime you go mudding to wash out your frame. Now, with the body on, there are several spots you can still get to. With the body off, I am now able to get to a lot more openings to get more pressure wash in there and just get better angles on some spots to knock rust out, to knock mud out. But I'll show you a few spots that you can get even with the body on so that you just know how to protect your frame so you don't end up having to do what I'm doing here. Hopefully you can stay on top of it before it becomes a problem. Now with the JKs, the JLs, the CJs, it's going to be a little bit different. But maybe by seeing what's on the TJ, you'll know what to look for. Or if you have a TJ, here's some spots you can look for. Let me flip this around. Okay, so one of my favorites is right in front of the rear axle here on the frame, where the lower control arm mounts. There's this big hole here. You can get a pretty good angle shooting up the frame there, which isn't as big of an issue because that's not where it pulls in the bottom. There's another spot back here behind the rear track bar that you can spray out the back of the frame pretty good, and a little hole there that you can get to as well. Those two may require pulling the inner fender well back a little bit. I do not remember off the top of my head though. This one should be accessible though. And it's a very important spot actually because this area here is one of the worst that's known to rust on Jeeps. Actually, my Jeep is sitting fairly level right now, and although it looks like the whole frame is level, there is actually water pooling right here. So after spraying it out with water, I actually took a leaf blower and blew air through. A compressor would work as well, but blow air through to try and blow some of that water out so it's not just sitting wet. Standing water is one of the worst things you can have for a Jeep. Let's see here. Those two holes are smaller. They're a little harder to get into, but that is another pivotal area to get cleaned out. So if you can get like a pressure washer in that hole, or even just deal with the blowback and blow a hose in there, try and get as many different angles as you can and try and just get everywhere because that's a pretty bad spot. Actually, on mine, you'll see I've got a little spot down here I need to patch because, well, maybe you can't see it. Yep, a little spot there I need to patch, and that's because of that. That actually worked out pretty well though, because right here, the nut for my transmission skid plate, all of the other 5 came out good. This one, the nut broke loose, so I'm gonna have to get a new nut up in there. So for that to be a hole right there, works out for me. There's this hole here as well. Middle of the frame's another one that's kind of known to rust out, but not as bad. And then right by the front body mount, another one. And those 3 are going to be I think your easiest to access of the low points. But you may be able to get up in the front fender well there. I'd have to look at it with the body on to remember, but if not, it would be worth getting up in under the Jeep to spray that out too. Because that is that curve, that low point right at the control arm mount. If there's any place you don't want your frame to rust, it's right at the control arm mounts, because that's where all the pressure sits. Okay, today I'll show you a little bit of the POR process though. And you've seen here, actually, you may have seen already, I've done some of it, and it's kind of covered in dust and grime right now because I've been working. But that is actually a super shiny, super clean finish, almost looks factory new, except for the fact that there is some pitting from the rust. But because that is so glossy, where I was not able to finish it, you'll see down here, at the time I didn't have this all sanded up. This was just kind of a test run on the POR because I have honestly never done this before. But where I was not able to finish it, I'm going to have to get a good seam here. And so because of the gloss, the paint won't actually stick to that well. So I've got here some 120 grit paper, sandpaper. I could probably use something a little finer than that, but really I just want to take some of the sheen off so that the overlap will stick and it's not just peeling right back off. So let's give that a start. As you can see there, it's no longer quite so shiny. I'm going to do some more work than that, but I gotta have two hands for this. As you can see here, I'm going to have a little trouble getting to some of the frame. So, few things. One, I need to find a way to get all these externals kind of held up top like this. And then I need to get this power steering gearbox off, which needs to come off anyway because I've got a new one. That one has been leaking for a couple of years and it's bad. But stuff like this, I have an idea. I'm not sure how well it'll work, but I have a bucket of mini bungees. I think this thing was like $3 at Walmart. I don't know, I've had it in the garage for years. And so, I'm going to try and just run bungees and pull all this stuff up and out of my way so I can get that paintbrush in there. Okay, so the next step is to get this steering gearbox off. I've already done some work, but I remembered I should be videoing, and I figured I'd go through what I've done so far. So I've checked to verify that all three of these bolts down here, that, and that, those are the ones that hold the gearbox in. Now this is just for 03 to 06. From 97 to 02, it was a different gearbox, but Daimler decided to do that. And this gearbox, which is a little harder to find than the old Chrysler version. So those are 17 millimeter. I've actually been soaking them with PB Blaster for a few days because I did not want them to break off. Let's see here. I've taken off both power steering hoses. Those really should have the right wrench for them because you don't want to strip them out, but they came pretty easily. Ended up having to use a crescent because I didn't have the right tool. I've loosened this guy. I don't remember off the top of my head what size that was. I believe that was a 13 millimeter. And then I pulled the pin out of the castle nut here, and that castle nut is 19 millimeter, and I just unscrewed that. What I did then was flipped the castle nut over and screwed it back down to where it's flush with the top of the bolt. Because I do actually want to save this tie rod end. It still looks decent. It's still pretty firm. So I'm not gonna try unless I have to, I'm gonna try not to use a pickle fork or anything because I don't want to destroy the boot. But I'm hoping that I can just give it a few good taps on the top of the bolt head there, but I don't want to ruin the threads. And so that's why I put the nut upside down and put it flush with the bolt, so it just spreads that weight out. I'm going to start with my rubber dead blow hammer because that'll just be that much better on the threads than a hammer, but if it comes down to it, I'll pull out a sledge. Well, the dead blow wouldn't do it, but nothing beats a 10-pound sledge. Hey, so I've got several hours of work in here that haven't been filmed, partially because this morning I was just trying to get a bunch of stuff done. I got this done, a few other things. but also because the last 2 hours I've been on hold with a parts company that I got some parts on order from, and after I placed the order it showed they were out of stock, and they're parts that I've kind of got a time crunch on, so I was trying to get an answer on how long they were going to be because their website doesn't show. So I spent 2 hours on hold, finally got a hold of them, finally got an answer. It doesn't look like it's going to be bad, but let me start here. This is actually the transmission skid plate, and it's actually what holds up the transmission and protects the transmission and the transfer case. This thing was pretty rusty. I did some grinding on it, got it nice and clean while I used a flat disc, which is like a sanding wheel. And got it nice and clean, put down a layer of primer, put down a clear coat, and I think it's looking pretty decent. These weren't the strongest to begin with, but as you can tell, it's kind of bent up already. But I've given it new life, so it'll get me through maybe another few years, maybe another few trips. I don't know, before I have to replace it with something more sturdy. Maybe it lasts till the Jeep doesn't last anymore. Who knows? We'll find out. The other thing I've been working on today has been the frame itself. I've got that steering gearbox that I was talking about completely out. I have not gotten the intermediate drive shaft off yet. Still working on that. It's seized on. It shouldn't be. I've also ground down and cleaned up the entire frame. As you can see, there are a few steps to the POR that unfortunately, because of the time on hold and the horrible music there, I was not able to film. But as you can see, I did do the first step, which was a cleaner degreaser, and it gets the metal all ready for it. And then there's a metal prep, and what that is, you spray it on and you keep the metal wet for 20 minutes. And what it's doing is it's actually turning like the rusty stuff and the bare metal into a form of like a zinc coating, so that the POR will stick better. You can see here kind of, that is not what it looked like before, but that is the result of the metal prep. So now I'm just waiting for the frame to dry. I've got a few spots I've got to dry off here, and it's hot enough. It's like, I think, almost 90 degrees today. So it's actually drying fairly well, except for the spots where it puddles. But as soon as it's dry, I'm going to get out the brush and the roller and just start going at it, and hopefully not get any in my hair, because this stuff doesn't come off, hence why I've got it all tucked up in a hat right now. We'll see. I don't know, I'll try to film some of that maybe, but we'll see about that. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is post POR. I accidentally got the springs a little bit, so I had some left over in the tub when I was done with my 2 coats. So I just did the best I could coating up the springs. It's kind of a rubbery coating, so I'm hoping it doesn't just flake off as they flex. But this stuff not only makes the thing look a whole lot better, which doesn't really matter to me as much, but it actually seals out moisture and air, and so it actually stops the rust rather than just covering it. And here it is, the finished product. POR 15. It's similar to Chassis Saver from what I hear, but I don't know how to compare them really. So that's it. I'm hot, I'm sweaty, I'm nasty, and even though I was wearing gloves and stuff, I did get some of it on me. I guess we'll find out how it comes off. Thanks for watching, y'all. God bless. So here is the can of POR. Look at this little guy, isn't it so cute?